Hello, MotoAmerica fans. It's time for another episode of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you may even learn something from this unlikely pair and their special guest. The mic is yours, Paul and Sean.
Hello, MotoAmerica fans. This is Paul Carruthers, and I'm the host of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. Sean Bice is my co-host. We do this every single week for our MotoAmerica fans, talking about all things MotoAmerica and sometimes stuff that's not MotoAmerica related. But the majority of our conversations are with MotoAmerica paddock people. And we're actually going to make a conscious effort to expand from that in the coming season and maybe drag some others out. Maybe that'll be, some Hollywood types that are into motorcycling and motorcycle racing or what have you. But yeah, we'll make some changes here as we go forward, but the backbone of our show will always be the people in the MotoAmerica paddock, and there's a lot of them, and they all have good stories, and we've got two of them today. So we will be talking to them momentarily. Sean, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's funny, I was laughing this morning because our colleague, Doug Hammond, who is in charge of our video and content like that, had put up that thing about apparently Scott Redding's not happy about the fact that not everybody's the same size in World Superbike. And I had to laugh about it. The first thing I thought of was when we had Dale Quarterly on, and back when we used to think, how does Dale do so well and win? And seeing him now, he doesn't seem that big, but it's kind of cool about one of our guests on today who was considered to be a big guy. Actually, both of them are, but we always thought of this, the dad of this group as being a big guy, but he won a lot of races and it's certainly a legend. So we'll have to ask him what he thinks about Scott Redding's thoughts about that. But that was interesting, wasn't it, Paul?
Yeah, I thought the same thing because I'm like, oh, they're talking about tall, big riders, and we've got two of them on our show. But I mean, that's a tough thing. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a little bit whiny. I mean, Alvaro Bautista is really small, but I think it's more the fact that he obviously rides really well. And I think it's probably more bike related than it is size related. So it's a tough situation, but I mean, I'm small, so I'm not going to play in the NBA. I'm not any good at basketball anyways. I'm not any good at basketball because I was too short to want to do it in the first place. So, I mean, I feel bad that they're big guys and they think they struggle against little guys, but I don't know what you do about it. I mean, you could do this combined weight thing, but I don't know if they'll go there or not. But it was a lot of comments on that Instagram post. I couldn't believe how many comments. I don't know that I've ever seen more. So in that way, it gets some conversation going. But I don't think it's probably much ado about nothing, But the guys we're talking to next would have more of an idea than we do. So let's introduce them. We actually have two members of the Yates family, Aaron and Ashton. Aaron being the father, Ashton being the son. Aaron was a hugely successful AMA motorcycle racer back in the good old days. He actually, it's funny, I started looking through the record book to see exactly what he'd won, and he freaking won basically every class that you could imagine. He ended up with 43 total AMA victories, and that puts him in the top 10 all time. But he won Superbike races, Supersport 600, Super Stock 1000, 750 Supersport, Super Twins. His first win was actually on a Super Twin at your home track there, Sean, at Loudon in 1994. Yeah. When I don't know if it was Super Twins or Twin Sports back then. It changed all the time, but either way, it was on an 883 Harley Davidson. So that's kind of cool. And he was a 4-time AMA champion. And like I said, the AMA record book is just littered with the Yates name. And now we have another Yates in MotoAmerica, and that being Ashton. He has some Junior Cup victories. He's got podiums in 4 or 5 different classes. He was the first guy in MotoAmerica to actually compete in 5 different classes. And he's young, 23 years old. And I looked, his father was, Aaron was 21 when he won his first races. So their careers seem, sort of age-wise, very similar. And it's funny because I think of Ashton as being much older than that. And I think it's just because he's been with us since the very beginning, and also he's always been a big kid, so he probably feels a bit older. But anyways, you guys, first of all, hello to both of you, and thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, what's up?
My intro was a little long-winded, but your dad's done a lot of cool shit, so I had to talk about it all.
Yeah, hello guys. Thanks for having us on. I don't know. You might have missed a couple of national wins there. I don't know, in a championship, super teams in '95. I was part of that cycle motion team.
Oh, see, right. A racer always knows everything he's done.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, but your total wins number, I think, was a little off from what I remembered. Somebody did a lot of work and came up with the answers a while back.
All
but
right.
it's been a long time messing around with the road racing for sure.
And now you obviously love this stuff, Aaron, as a racer, and now you've got your kid doing it, and you're a constant member of our paddock and a big presence in our paddock. And I see you working on the kids' bikes all the time, and you're really involved. You don't know any other way, right?
Yeah, I guess so. That's definitely the way it looks. I raced and either dad or worked on bikes, before I was, got full-time racing myself. And, unfortunately I got injured and kind of ended, I quit racing. And at that time, it was kind of Ashton's time to kind of move up and do more riding. And I got real in depth with that, and, just been kind of recovering from that too since then. But it's been good. It's been a lot going on for sure.
It's funny, Aaron, Ashton, I'm gonna talk to your dad a little bit. You guys know I come over and see you guys a fair amount on every weekend, and your dad's always got his head down there working on something with your bike. But Aaron, at the top of the podcast, Paul hit the nail on the head. It was Loudon, you and Twin Sports. That's when I first became a fan of yours. That weekend when I saw you riding on those Twin Sports, and I remember all the guys. I think it was Nigel Gale, and I think even Chuck Blackman was racing. Jackson Blackman's son there. But that actually started my love of Aaron Yates. And then ironically, when I ended up moving to Ohio and ended up living about the same distance from Mid-Ohio that I lived from Loudon, then here you were at Loudon, Mid-Ohio, an absolute legend there. Always known for the guy that always got his elbow down, and you'd be sitting in your motorhome on the side of the paddock there out front with a lawn chair, and people could come over and talk to you. And it's funny about my recollection of you, and my fandom for you came out of two tracks that I used to go to all the time, and you absolutely did amazing there. Do you wish Ashton would get a chance to race it at Mid-Ohio at some point?
Oh yeah, for sure. I like those tracks, because they were tight. They had some pretty good, little quick elevation changes. They were kind of closest thing to, I guess, to like a motocross type of course, which is what I had. I grew up racing motocross. And if, I wasn't so busy with racing, Ashton probably would have got to do a good bit more riding in the dirt too. But, I did excel at those tracks like that. And you might could look at that performance at those places kind of due to like my size, being able to move the bike around a little better than a smaller guy, going back to that subject. But, they were fun tracks for me, and that was all what it was always about, when you're having fun out there, and real loose and going hard, and, that's good results would come. So,
well, did you think of your size as being an advantage, actually? Because I remember people would call you Double Aaron the Enforcer, because you used your muscle out there in a lot of different ways, but certainly to muscle even the little Supersport bikes around, but certainly your Superbike. Did you feel like, your size had an advantage instead of a disadvantage for you? And take that forward, Aaron, to when you raced in World Superbike, because you did race in ABR on the World Championship level. So, did your size come into play an advantage for you throughout your career?
Well, at places like Daytona, I always felt like it was definitely a disadvantage, because you got more wind drag. you're heavier, and you spend so much time at top speeds tucked in that it reduced your top speed. I always never really had the best top speeds on anything, but although I was able to win 600 stock race at Brainerd and and different tracks like that, it was kind of surprising sometimes. But yeah, I mean, my size, I just had to ride really hard, push the bike, and always kind of being kind of over the edge and just controlling the motorcycle over the edge of the grip, and and just maneuvering it around. I don't know. I've never been a small dude, so figured that it'd be a little tougher.
One thing I always remember, Aaron, I think I've mentioned this to you, both you and Ashton, before. I'll never forget this. It was, gosh, I don't know what year it was, but it was Ashton was pretty young. You were on the podium at Loudon, and I remember Richard Chambers would always come up from wherever he was, but he was always obviously the announcer at Daytona, but he would do the Loudon Classic. And I remember you were on the podium, and you brought Ashton up, who was actually a baby at that point. He was so young. And I remember when Richard said something to you, well, like, you probably don't remember this, but I'll never forget. He said something like, well, who's the little girl you have with you? He goes, this ain't no girl. This here's a boy. And I remember you were, and I was mad too, because I knew you had a son, and I was out there, a face in the crowd, going, well, what the hell are you doing calling Ashton Yates a girl?
Hey,
I never.
Wasn't the Loudon, Sean, the Loudon races were always Father's Day weekend, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because I remember Chandler winning his first Superbike national there and having, I guess would have been Jet up on the podium. It was kind of cool because it was Father's Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Father's Day was always up there. Like, my dad was there, and then my grandfather was there too. We had some pretty good Father's Day events up there for sure.
Do you even remember him doing that, Aaron?
Yeah, a little bit. I kind of do. It kind of
made me angry. And then,
well, as a matter of fact, I actually have an 18-month-old little girl right now.
Oh, you do?
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good on you for being able to do that.
Yeah, well done. Well done, Aaron.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk to Ashton a little bit. Ashton, it's I had a famous father who won a lot of races as well, and I elected not to race, not because of that. They kind of didn't really want me to. I don't think my mom wanted to go through the whole thing again with all the worry and the heartache and all that kind of crap that goes with racing, but I elected not to. Now, you've elected to be a racer. Do you find it tough sometimes with your dad having the success that he had? I mean, obviously it's a good thing because he can pass down a lot of knowledge, but there's also the thing of like, oh, he's Aaron's kid. Is that ever an issue with you or not?
Not a whole lot, really, I guess. I mean, every now and then, some people are a little weird about it, I guess, or something, but no, not really. I mean, I've never really thought of it like that. A whole lot. Just kind of do my thing and just kind of focus on what's going on and not really worry about that too much.
Yeah, I just take the good and not the bad. But Aaron, what about you from the other side of that? Is it when my son raced motocross a little bit when he was young, it was really hard for me to watch. Like, I didn't really like it. It was too stressful. It was like a whole different thing of like watching your kid compared to when you were doing it. You obviously don't have that issue anymore. Did you have it initially? Was it difficult at first?
Oh, yes, it was very difficult. Yeah, it has been tough, in the early times, even, now that, I mean, I've gone through, I watched the kids learn how to ride a bicycle. I watched them learn how to fall off. You learn how to fall and crash and, not get hurt and stuff. And then, when they're younger, and then you kind of lose that, get over that little fear of them. And then, yeah, going into the road racing thing, we did that. And when he started road racing, I don't know when it was, 2015 or 14, I come up with a 125, TZ 125. And there's we went to a couple tracks, and she'd go out the first lap and never come back. And that was pretty nerve-wracking there for a little while.
Right.
And a couple of times he did fall or run off the track, and once had a bike failure and stuff like that. But so, and then after a couple of years, and then once, you see over time, he's been successful and done well and riding really good. And it's that feelings kind of eased away, I guess. And it's always been tough for me to be at the racetrack and not participating.
Yeah.
So thankfully, I've got a position where I'm hands-on with the motorcycle and got a lot of involvement with that. And otherwise it'd be really tough for me to hang around, for the weekend and with nothing to do. But that was definitely a factor for a little while. And but yeah, it's all good now. I mean, he's proven he's a really good rider, smart rider. And things are looking good for Ashton. I hope.
Yeah, I want to talk about that we'll talk with both of you guys, but especially with Ashton. I mean, Ashton, you were top 10 this year in Superbike, and it's interesting because you were a rookie this year. I mean, so was Richie Escalante. Technically, so was Danilo Petrucci. So I guess if we were going to give a rookie of the year, I don't know if we give it to Petrucci, but by rule, I guess he was. However, let's think about you and Richie. You only finished 8 points behind Richie. He was in ninth. He had a decent year. He got better as the year went on. You had a good year. You were pretty consistent all year. I remember for the longest time in the season, you raced. You didn't crash for quite a while. You didn't even go down, and you were getting to know the bike. And that it's a brand new bike for you. You were riding a Honda before that. With the BMW S1000RR that Steve Scheibe has, and I'm going to say it rather facetiously, but it's one of the most developed motorcycles out there. He's never had more than one rider on it at any time. But Ashton, I want to ask you about this season. Were you happy with this season, how it went for you? And also, during the year, does any of the data from any of the previous riders who have ridden that bike, did you ever look at that? So it's kind of a two-part question there, but first start out, how do you feel about your first season and being top 10 in Superbike?
Yeah, it was a fun year for sure. I'm pretty happy with it. I think, we had like multiple top 6 finishes, almost a top 5 one race, and then in the rain at Jersey, we're kind of up there at the front, had a opportunity for a possible podium, but and then went down, unfortunately. But yeah, it was a good year. I learned a lot working with Steve, and he's a really cool dude, and it was cool to see him and my dad work together and bounce ideas off each other and stuff. And I did look at a lot of data from the past riders, and that was something new for me this year, and that was really new. That was a new learning experience for me, and pretty helpful thing. And yeah, I mean, that was the first Superbike I had rode, so this year was, I mean, it was pretty much the best bike I've ridden. Fastest bike, handled really well compared to the Honda. And I broke all my personal best lap times at every track, I think, this year, and even maybe 3 or 4 out of the 10 rounds, 3 or 4 of the personal best for Steve on that bike. But yeah, it was a fun year for sure, and it went by super fast. I can't believe it.
Yeah, one thing I want to talk about here, and I know you and your dad and Lucky, your grandfather, know this story a little bit too, but I'm absolutely not trying to take any credit whatsoever for this. But, it seems like Steve Scheibe is always driving his truck somewhere or the other, or he says he has a lot of windshield time, as he puts it. So he does this thing, and he's probably done this to you guys too. He basically talks into his phone, and it transcribes what he says, and it doesn't always make a lot of sense, but sometimes it does. And during the off season, I mean, I talked to him a fair amount, and we were talking about different riders and everything. And we talked about you, and I remember distinctly saying, well, the thing that's cool about Ashton is he's an up and coming young rider, and he's proven himself on a leader bike with his Honda. But I said, I think probably what might happen is if you work with him, you're going to get a crew. You're going to get his dad and his grandfather who have already been working with him in the past. obviously, you know, it's family, so they all know each other well, but, you know, you're going to get a lot for what you're doing there. And it doesn't often happen. I guess it does sometimes if a rider has a crew chief or whatever who will come into a team. But for you, I mean, it was kind of cool that it worked out that you slotted right into that team as the rider, and your dad and grandfather were able to join the team too, which it was great that you did, Aaron, do that. But Ashton, I had to be special this year. And I know you worked as a team in the past, but to be on an actual Superbike team and have your dad and grandfather working with you. And tell us about what they actually did in the team with you and how it went.
Yeah, so yeah, it was pretty neat again to have I've always had my dad and granddad, you know, as a part of my team, and to bring them, Steve, was really cool to have them a part of the team this year. He was really cool about that, about bringing them in, and everyone worked great together. And yeah, I mean, it was my dad was pretty much my crew chief, and Steve was kind of, I mean, there too. They were both kind of a crew chiefs, you know, bouncing ideas off each other. And Steve would kind of do more of the electronics, do all the electronics actually, and my dad was more of the setup kind of guy. But it was, yeah, I mean, it was really cool. My granddad's just, you know, there for anything, you know, and he did a lot of the fuel stuff and other little things maybe, but yeah, we the whole canopy thing was kind of new this year. We weren't used to that at the beginning, but it was crazy. By the end of the year, we got the hand of the canopy stuff, but I think we could probably take it down, put it up with just 3 or 4 of us now. But yeah, it was definitely a fun year. It went by fast. Met a lot of cool people. Yeah, hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah,
Steve I was gonna say, Steve's got a nice little setup. He's got everything, you know, the truck, the canopy, the you know, the bikes, the whole program, all the tools, and you know, we just kind of showed up and used his whole, you know, his kit and went racing. It made it easy for us, you know, not having to keep up with the bike and transport it to the events, and then for him, you know, with us mechanics and experience we have and working together, it all just kind of flowed really well this year. It was a good year. Yeah, it went by too fast.
Yeah, it did go fast. Hey, Aaron, so I want to ask you on that note regarding the fact that Steve Scheibe is kind of a contemporary of yours in the fact that you raced against him when he was a team, you know, when he worked for Harley, and obviously with Scott Russell and Picat and all the guys that you raced against. It's kind of interesting that you were on that team. And of course, you were a rider then. Now you were a crew member. When you worked with Steve or worked with Ashton, is it hard not to, did you think like a rider? Is it hard not to think like a rider? Do you understand what kind of rider Ashton is? And did that help? Were there any times where it was hard for you because you wanted to be like, well, let me get on that bike and show you how to do it or something? Did that ever come up?
Oh no, I mean, I'm not. I don't kind of come across like that. I mean, it is difficult sometimes it's difficult as just being a rider sometimes, you know, you get stuck, you know, trying to figure out, well, where can I get these couple more tenths, you know, and it's tough, and, you know, try not to bring any negative into it or nothing. But, you know, going back to Steve, yeah, I mean, I've known of him for, I don't know, 30 years or something, but actually I never even spoke to the guy until this year, really. And, you know, it's kind of an honor to get to work with him. I mean, he's, you know, been part of so many operations, you know, and with different teams, and you know, up the ladder pretty good as team owner or whatever, managers and stuff. And you know, going back to the data thing, Ashton getting introduced to all that, you know, working with Steve, because he's really, you know, he's up on all that really well, and researches it hard and knows what he's looking for. It's been a big plus working with Steve this year, and it's made things easy. But yeah, he did mention that one time I think he actually did run an event, actually competed or raced a class one time maybe. I'm not sure, but yeah.
All right, Aaron, I kind of waver on this back and forth, but I always look at like how things are now and how things were before, because I think that's kind of how we learn, and I think you have to compare. And sometimes it's not a real fair comparison, because there were some really good days back then, as far as AMA Superbike racing went. But then there was also
Oh yeah.
there's some really crap days. So I like to compare MotoAmerica to the crap days, because then we look good. But I do you do you think things are more difficult or less difficult now as a rider? I tend to look at it that I think it's difficult to be a racer these days, because I don't think there's as many opportunities for you to shine. In other words, I think if we put Ashton back in the 1990s, the kid would probably have had a factory Supersport or Super Stock 1000 or whatever ride, where he could have, focused more on just his racing and actually open some eyes as to how good he really is to get that next step. And now those steps there's a lot of steps on the way to Superbike racing that we've created with the classes, but there's still not a lot of opportunity as far as factory rides go. And I think that's probably the biggest issue we have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But yes, as far as I would say, for me personally, I mean, just coming from, I always kind of excelled in the stock classes, a little less electronics in the bikes and all that. Even 20 years ago, I mean, we had all the electronics we have now. It was just kind of at the beginning of the development and learning all the strategies. There's so many different ways to control your wheel slip and stuff like that. But and now, it's you always have the guy with the computer who can make a couple clicks and really change the whole program, and there's always that little kind of thing there that, unless as long as you got plenty of map switches, you got all these buttons and stuff. I mean, it's kind of hard. A lot of the straightaways in the American road racing aren't long enough to flip the switches where you
Right.
need to. There's a lot to think about out there other than just going fast. It's different in those types of ways for sure.
Was that something that Mladen and his crew were perhaps a little bit better than you? I mean, did that help him more than it helped you?
Well, I mean, honestly, Matt rode the one bike. He was able to focus on one Superbike, one type of tires. I was riding DOT tires and 16.5-inch slicks on Superbikes and stuff, and it was hard to jump back and forth between those bikes in a day and be able to go to the limit on the slicks on the Superbike like you want or needed to, And a lot of times I'd focus more energy probably on the stock stuff, and then I always had to compete with Matt, and then I always felt like we're getting Suzuki on the podium 1, 2, 3 with me, Matt, and Ben, or whatever, getting the job done. But as I look back at it now, I wish I would have put more focus, more effort probably on the Superbike, and probably, and even tried to be in better physical conditioning and stuff, and you always want to look back and try to do some things better. But that's I think the 1 year, I won a 600 championship in 2002, 2003. I got to ride only a Superbike, and I actually led the Superbike points halfway through the year, and then I had a couple clutch issues, and kind of took me out of the championship running for that. And it definitely makes a difference just getting the focus on one motorcycle. That's why this year, Ashton was signed up to run the Honda and Super Stock and the BMW and Superbike, and Steve was fine with that. But then myself and my father and John Blake, he's been a real big hand with us this year. We would have been bouncing back and forth between the two classes and the bikes, and just way too much work. And we wanted Ashton to be able to focus on just the Superbike, even though both bikes, they run the same tires and stuff now, and the races are a lot shorter and stuff, but it was actually more easier on the crew for us. So that's what we elected to do this year.
Yeah, that was amazing, Aaron. You bring up that 2002 year. Obviously you won the title with 5 victories in Supersport, but you had 7 podiums in Superbike that year. And then the next year you go and win Superbike races at Road Atlanta, Brainerd, and Barber. And then you're on the podium 7 times after that. So, I mean, I guess you're right. Concentrating on it's good, but man, getting track time is maybe interesting too. I want to ask you, because some of this stuff with your career and back in the day, for me, ends up being a little bit of a fish story. And I'm trying to remember, there was one year where Crevier and Pegram were on that TL 1000S or whatever it was, and you guys were on the CSXR 1000 or 750.
Yeah.
You can tell me what it was. How many, was that 4 riders on that team or 5?
Yeah, it was. We had 2 trucks. I guess they might have, I don't know if they were 750s or what. What year was that?
Gosh, I can't remember either, but I
Around
remember
2000, 2001 probably. I think we were developing the 1000 GSXR, whatever. But yeah, I got to ride that TL, or both Matt and I rode the TLs a little bit at a Phoenix test at the end of the test. I really liked the twin. I wanted to have a twin, like for Sears Point in Ohio, and a couple other tracks. Yeah, I kind of wanted to have a twin on one side of the, tent from a spare bike, that's 750 for the other, or the inline, whichever it was. And but no, they wouldn't go for that.
I did not know that. Wow, that's interesting. I remember those guys riding that, and they always seem to ride in formation. They always seem to be together, Crevier and Pegram, but I didn't know that you were trying to actually ride that bike too. I always felt like performance-wise, it was a step behind the GSXR, but you're saying maybe for the torque or whatever, you would have liked to maybe have had that. Did it turn it with its left-right transition actually pretty good because it was a twin?
Well, I rode it at Phoenix little speedway there to test, and I did probably, I don't know, 6-7 laps or something on it, and just from my initial impressions, I thought that it was pretty neat. And yeah, you could just, the torque, you just short shift the thing and lug it around, and it had pretty good traction, and it was just different. Something I was never, I kind of compared it to like a Ducati or something, which I had never ridden one, and but it was I mentioned that I would like to have it, but then I didn't try too hard.
So Ashton, this kind of leads into another question I was going to ask your dad, but I want to ask you about this, and Paul might remember this. I'm having a little trouble right now, but I think it was at New Jersey. Didn't you podium in both Supersport and Junior Cup or RC KTM RC Cup in the same weekend?
That was Road Atlanta.
Oh, Road Atlanta. Okay.
Yeah, Road Atlanta.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to say, you talk about that because was it wet that weekend too? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was wet. Yeah, so it was the Junior Cup. I think I won the race Sunday and then finished third in the Supersport race that afternoon.
I think I get mixed up on you because I think you had a podium at New Jersey, and that was the time where we joked with you about this before, where Paul asked you a question at the press conference, and he kind of froze up because it was early on. But man, you've come a long way since then. You do great on these podcasts, and you're a good person to talk to. So I think that's why that all mixes up in my head. But the point I was trying to make is you raced kind of in 2 classes, and this year even you were. It's not really. It was 2 classes. You originally were going to race your Honda in Stock 1000 and also race in Superbike, and I think you might have brought the bike, and kind of that fell by the wayside a little bit. Tell us about what that plan was going to be, and the fact that you raced that Honda last year, and maybe we're going to continue a little bit with it. And Steve didn't initially seem to have any kind of an issue with it, but it did fall by the wayside. Why did that happen?
Or just why we decided not to ride it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
It was. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was down to ride it. I actually did ride it in Atlanta, but then I was liking the Superbike. I could tell it's a proper race bike compared to the Honda, even though the Honda is a great stock bike. But it was a little bit different. The seating was different, and I was kind of ready to either give it my all on the Superbike and get the best results possible, or try to win or podium in the stock class. And it was going to be kind of tough to I'd have to really push it to do both those things. I feel like it would be kind of difficult. with 2 different bikes and stuff. But it just kind of was a lot, like my dad said. And I mean, I could have done it. It would have been more track time and stuff, which would have been nice. But overall, it was just easier, and I could, go over or try to figure out what we need to change on the Superbike and what needed to be done, for the next session, and kind of talk about things and relax instead of, hopping on a bike every hour or whatever. And there would have been back-to-back sessions, I think, and stuff. So it just would have been a lot of scrambling around. But I mean, I would have been down for it, but this seemed like the best. This was my first year in Superbike, and Steve, gave me an opportunity to get my foot in the door and ride his BMW, and I kind of wanted to take advantage of that and do the best I could and kind of show people what I can do my first year on a Superbike. So it's kind of how I looked at it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was a wise decision. So it's interesting because now, of course, it's hard to even think back now that we raced 2 races for most classes. Obviously, Stock 1000 this last year, they didn't race 2 races every time, but a lot of these guys would race Superbike Cups, so they'd either get 1 race in Stock 1000 and then 2 in Superbike with Superbike Cup for a minimum of 3 or 4 on a weekend. And to the point of what you're saying, Ashton, I want to ask this question to Aaron. Now, Aaron, you were very good on both Supersport machinery and Superbike machinery, and then you had, and I'm not casting aspersions towards your teammate there, but Matt, thinking back to the fact that Matt had 1 race on the weekend, and here you had 2. So, I mean, was it helpful at all for you back then to race the Supersport bike at the same time on the same weekend, I should say? Or was it kind of hard to go from one to the other because the ergonomics are so different, the power delivery is different and all that? Was there pros and cons to it for you?
I mean, to me, I was making an effort to go to the track and spend the time there, and I was gonna, ride as much as I could, try to, make as much money as I could. Basically, that was my job. That's where my income was, and I had the opportunities to make some more money. That's what I was doing.
Okay.
That's kind of the way I looked at it. And I just did it because, I mean, I enjoyed the riding and developing the motorcycles and making them go. It wouldn't have been any fun sitting there watching the, Super 600 race, even if it was right before the Superbike race. I mean, sitting there looking at these guys. I mean, all the guys were getting paid good money and having to run 2 classes at the time, and it's just kind of the way it was. And but that was my motivation for sure.
It's kind of weird though, isn't it, to think back at those days that there was a lot. I mean, I guess maybe there were more qualifying sessions, more practice. I don't know, but you think the track time for an individual rider back then was less than it is now, wouldn't you say?
The what?
Was the track time, the actual track time, more or less back then than it is now for like Ashton?
I mean, as far as practice and qualifying, it was kind of similar. There was a couple of different ways they did qualifying over the years, but the actual races are shorter now, quite a bit.
Right.
Like I think Superbike races used to be 100K, and they're only 60 now.
Right.
I think 600 races were 75K. But so the actual race durations were quite a bit longer. But it was what it was. And it was the track time was good. It made the days go by faster, and you learned something riding a different bike. And that was the idea for him to ride both the bikes, at the beginning of the year, to kind of see what one bike does better than the other, and you're like, well, this thing does that, and we need to make this other bike, turn like that here. And, Ashton's ridden a couple of different classes, and I put him on those just for a learning experience, to let him know. I was like, if you're going to, go forward in this game, you got to be able to ride whatever, to the limit. And, with more experience, the better, the way I always looked at it.
So Ashton, you mentioned earlier in the conversation about your lap times compared to other guys that have ridden that BMW. And that to me is, I would, if I was you, I would base myself more on that than actually the race results, because it might mean more. I mean, there's been some good guys that have ridden that motorcycle, and for you to go faster than them at certain tracks is a pretty big deal. Did Steve probably thought of that the same way, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he would. Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't really talk about that as much. If he was happy, you could tell, and then he would, he'd tell me good job and stuff. But yeah, we'd go over the data and stuff, and I could see it all. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of my idea too. I wanted to know what Josh did here or did at a track, and I'd want to know how Gagne. I kind of wanted to know how all the guys did it, honestly. And we kind of looked at Hector a lot though, because Hector, we were kind of struggling with like corner entry, trail braking stuff, and then Hector really perfected that, so we kind of looked at him a lot. But yeah, I could really put down a fast lap with the qualifying tire for whatever reason. I mean, at some tracks I was with the race tire too, but for some reason, every time we put a qualifying tire on the BMW, I could really put down, like, drop or put down a good time, drop a lot of time, no problem. But then in the race, kind of might struggle with the grip,
right,
a little more. But yeah.
Okay, moving on to next year, do you know what your program's going to be yet, or is it too early?
Yeah, it's still a little early. Nothing solid, but definitely would like to be on a Superbike again, obviously. And but yeah, we're just kind of taking it easy, and still pretty early, waiting to see what happens.
All right, I got one last question for Aaron. Aaron, you were teammates with Matt Mladen for a long time, or a lot of seasons. He had this thing that I will always remember him for, is he basically, I think to further drive himself, he basically made enemies out of everybody else that he raced against. Now, unless my memory's totally wrong, I don't think he ever did that to you. Like, I don't know if it was a respect thing or a thing that you were big enough that you could beat his butt if he needed it. But did you get the same feeling from him, or did I miss that? And was there a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I think your view is pretty accurate, really. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I never really got much beef from Matt. I didn't think Matt was. I mean, you could see the show he put on against other folks, and it was entertaining for myself. But I mean, honestly, I mean, I don't look at Matt as that kind of an asshole, because he never really was to me much. It's just Matt was how Matt was, and yeah, he liked to try to punk people out and do his thing. But yeah, honestly, yeah, we never had much of an issue at all, really. He did his thing, I did mine. We were so different on the bikes that it didn't really matter what he was doing or what I was doing. It just didn't work for either of us on our motorcycles, so we didn't really share much data or anything. And he had a really good team. He had his whole Australian crew guys, and plus a couple others, and they had some good worldwide connections, and had some good, Matt had some good stuff to ride, and he was definitely a tough competitor, and yeah, he definitely deserves all his credibility he's got, and yeah, miss those days.
Well, Aaron, let me say this. I've always been your fan, and I always thought he was just afraid of you, is what it was. So,
yeah.
That's the way I felt. It's like, don't mess with that double A run enforcer.
Yeah, well, I had a lot going on, always focused, always trying to figure out, you're at the track, you're and especially riding two classes, you're trying to figure out how to make these motorcycles go around the racetrack as fast as you can, and it takes a lot of, just a lot of focus, a lot of things to figure out, spending a lot of time, thinking about it, and, kind of might have that, intimidating look and all that, but to keep people from bothering me.
That's right. Well, you know, Paul probably will agree with this, but one of the things I always remember about your press conferences, Aaron, is when you were in there, your answers were always complete and pretty heartfelt. I mean, you didn't say yes or no answers. You always gave people a good amount of information. Paul, would you say that was true when Aaron was on the podium?
Yeah, he was always good to talk to. I always had to go
Yeah.
find him. I used to go find him sometimes. If he wasn't on the podium, it made it a little more difficult. But once I found him, he was good.
Yeah, well,
Hey,
you know,
so
you want the people to get the story, have the story straight and all that. So I try to give as much facts as I can.
Right.
Yeah, and it was absolutely noticeable, Aaron. So Ashton, we're getting ready to wrap here, and I feel like I need to ask you another question, but I do have another question for Aaron on a completely separate topic. So, you know, Ashton, let me just ask you this real quick. Are you going to, I assume you're going to get on the car. Well, you'll be at the Heron compound. Please send us your videos, dude, because every time you go around a track, a kart track on a supermoto bike, people go crazy when we post it. So make sure you send us that. I'm sure you're going to do more of that training this offseason and already have been, right?
Oh yeah, I'll for sure. I've already done some, and I have some videos if you guys want them. But yeah, I'm actually supposed to go hang out with PJ Jacobson in about a week and a half, and we're gonna go down to, or he lives down there in Florida. We're gonna go to the Bushnell kart track and got a guy videoing fast class media, and we're gonna get some good stuff, and I'll send it your way.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Send it to us. And I mean, PJ sends us some too, or we try to get them from him, and he's pretty awesome on those things too. A lot of you guys are, and it's fun to watch on the off season. So Aaron, here's my question for you. I've kind of evolved over my life to be more of a Toyota guy now. I'm pretty loyal. All the vehicles I have are Toyotas, but when I was younger, and I was always a Pontiac man. I loved GTOs. My dad had them. You were at one time, and I'm wondering if you still are. Are you still a Mopar guy? And do you still have any Mopar drag cars like you used to? And what were the Mopar drag cars that you had, by the way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have my stuff. I got a couple Dodge Darts. I got a 69 340 Swinger street car that I bought like my senior year of high school. That was all in pieces. I got another 69 Dart. It's a small block nitrous car, stock suspension, leaf spring car. I used to run some 8-mile stuff down here in the southeast until everybody started going so fast. But it's all a steel car. It goes really good for what it is. You know, run almost 140 mile an hour on 8 mile. But
that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
A 340 was like is that the biggest engine you could put in a Dart?
That's a small block. Those are small blocks.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, no, they came with 383s, 440s, and even the 426 Hemis and stuff. But lately, I've kind of gotten the bug. I've accumulated a couple older Audis, 20-year-old Audis, the B5 S4s and all roads and stuff. And I came across a car, and it kind of got my interest. The things are pretty sophisticated. I mean, they kind of took me back to the Superbike times because you can, plug into the ECUs on them, and there's a lot of stuff going on you can mess with. And so I kind of got into those. And I got some stuff sitting around I need to work on for sure.
I always love that about you. You had that mechanical side of things. And isn't Steve's kind of into Audis, isn't he? A little bit, or BMWs, I guess. I mean, he is that.
Yeah, he's a BMW guy for sure. He was telling me he's got a convertible, something I'm not sure that he enjoys ripping around in. And yeah, you got to have something to take your mind off of other things, little hobbies to enjoy once in a while. But it's I've about created almost too much work for myself with all the junk I've got.
Well, that's cool. It's good to hear that you're keeping active with that, and it's always great to have you and your dad, granddad to Ashton, and certainly Ashton in the paddock too. It's been a good year. We're looking forward to next year with you guys. We'll wrap it up here, but it was great to have you guys both on at the same time. An absolute legend and an up-and-coming Superbike rookie, and that your whole family is terrific, and we've enjoyed having you on. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks
a lot.
Hey guys, one quick thing from me is, Sean, is it just me, or have you noticed when you go by their pit area, it seems like the only one who ever looks any older is Ashton. Because Lucky and Aaron look the same as they did 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And the other thing is, when I didn't see him as much this year, Aaron, but I always think he's not your brother, he's your uncle. He looks so much like you.
Uncle. Yeah, Uncle Gary. That's my brother's, my dad's brother. Yeah, there's 13 years between them two, and there's 13 years between him and I.
Wow.
And, yeah, we could pass for brothers for sure. I think people have mistaken him for me on more than one occasion.
and now you have an 18-month-old little girl, and you have Ashton.
That's right.
It's amazing.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What comes around goes around, I guess.
All right, you
well,
guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, and have a good rest of your off season. And obviously, we'll see you as we get rolling next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going. I gotta go back to work now.
Yeah.
That part sucks.
Thanks for taking the time, Aaron. Really, thank you.
Yeah, guys.
All right.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, guys. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good